Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. Apologies if it sounds like I'm stuffed up while I'm doing this vlog. Basically when I said I wasn't feeling great on Tuesday, that's not go away. It kind of got worse on Wednesday, and even today it's just kind of been lingering. I am getting better, but there are some after effects, which includes the sinuses. So just kind of a heads up in case you end up noticing how if I sound weird at all during this vlog. So there you go. But either way, today we will be concluding our discussion of the Spider-Verse Team Up miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Verse Team Up number 3. And, well, both stories in this issue actually take place just before the climax of Spider-Verse, specifically when the Spider Army was hunkered down in the bunker on Earth 3145, with both stories essentially showcasing how different members of the team are preparing themselves before they launch their final assault on Loomworld, with the first story actually tying into stuff that went on during Spider-Verse. So, if you remember from the main storyline, one of the things that was another event that would end up going off into its own spin, that would go off in one of the tie-ins, involved Anya Corazon and one of the scrolls that the Spider Army had gotten from Spider-Woman. Now, while we never learned what the contents of those scrolls were, though I did kind of mention it when it became important in Spider-Verse, well, this issue does kind of go into it because, as I mentioned when I talked about the main Spider-Verse storyline, the scroll actually explained Karn's history. Basically, how his family shunned him, how he hunted spiders not for sport but because he had to, and how he ultimately hates his family. So the spider, as such, Anya and the rest of the Spideys believe that if using this knowledge, they can turn Karn to their side. And so Anya wound up gathering a team of Spideys to go find Karn. In this case, the team included herself, Spider UK, Ashley Barton, Spider Punk, and Spider-Man India, and they plan to intercept him and talk to him. Now, while there was some minor interference, as the superior Spider-Man thought this was a stupid plan, as he's faced Karn before, and he thought the whole mission was doomed from the start. When Anya does talk about Karn and his rough relation with his family, including how he hates his father, Otto actually kind of relates, as he also does not like his own father. So he decides, as such, he thinks that maybe they will have a chance. So he lets Anya and her team go, and rather fortuitous too, because they managed to catch Karn just as he's in the middle of hunting another spider totem, specifically the Spider-Man, which, if you don't know, is a version of Aunt May from a universe where she got bitten by the spider instead of Peter. Yeah, if you can't tell, this was a kind of sort of a gag character. Like with various other Spidey, she got her start from a storyline in What If, specifically one of their backup joke storylines. And I've read the story, and it is just a gag. The whole story does not take itself seriously, because this is supposed to be this old lady who can now kick ass, cling to walls, and do all this superhero stuff, and yet now she's the one swinging around in red and blue pajamas. The initial story does not give itself one iota of seriousness, and it's glorious. I cannot deny it. It's a glorious story, and I cannot recommend finding it enough. It even ends on a rather kind of silly note when Peter ends up seeing his Aunt May while she's in her own Spidey jammies, and he's the one that ends up fainting, and May thinks, "Oh, I have to keep this a secret because I didn't know my Peter was so frail." Like, good God, that's just so stupid, but it's great. I love it. It's just such a great gag. And spoilers, this isn't the last time we see her. She does appear later on in other Spider-Verse related material, and it's glorious. I'm not going to deny it. I won't go into more detail because I will be talking about those stories later on, but it's glorious, and I can't deny it. Either way, yeah, Karn's here to hunt her, and he's threatening this world's Peter and Ben to find May. But as such, May, wanting to protect her nephew and husband, does reveal her identity to them. And basically, she wants to go without a fight. She can already tell Karn is much stronger than her, and that in a fair fight that she wouldn't win. And quite frankly, she doesn't want her nephew and she doesn't want her nephew and husband to get hurt. So she just says, "It's fine. I give myself up. Kill me if you must. Just let my family go." And this actually gets to Karn because, well, May's kindness and heart do actually manage to touch him and briefly do. Excuse me, sec. Sorry about that, kind of coughing fit. But anyway, yeah, basically May's show of affection and basically it's May's self-sacrifice and heart do remind Karn briefly of his mother, but before he can talk himself out of sparing May, he tells himself, "No, I have to do this. I have to do this. Fate can't be defied. But just know I'll make your death quick and painless because you've touched me like no other Spidey has touched me before." However, before he can ultimately skewer May through with his two-pronged spear, that's when Anya and her team of Spideys come and start kicking his ass with Hobby getting the Parkers and pushing him into the other room, while the team of Spideys ends up dealing with Karn. At first, he thinks they're just here to fight it out with him, which he thinks will just result in their death because, well, he's Karn of the Inheritors, he can easily overpower them. But the Spiders begin letting him know that no, they're not here to fight him. They want to recruit him. Of course, he thinks that's stupid, but they start revealing their hand as they tell him about the scroll they required that talks about his history, how, unlike the other inheritors, he doesn't hunt Spideys for sport, he does it for survival, that he didn't actually want to that he didn't want to conquer the multiverse like his family, but rather wanted to explore it, to build anew, and so forth. And Karn, well, he thinks that this knowledge is stupid, and even if they do want to bring him onto their team, he just finds that to be an insane plan at all. Like it's like if the gazelle wanted to ally itself with a lion, which is an analogy he actually uses. But either way, the Spideys continually hold on one sec. Sorry about that. I was checking my notes. But either way, yeah, the Spideys do briefly actually do tell him that yeah, despite what he says about being the hunter, he really has no obligation to his family. After all, they abandoned him, and while they did claim that they abandoned him because of what happened, because they say he was responsible for his mother's death, the Spideys claim it. They only did that because they were afraid of him, because he was one of the few inheritors that challenged their whole ideology. So he didn't fit into the mold, so they were afraid of him. So they sent him packing. Karn, of course, still finds it pointless because, he's still an inheritor and he has to feed on animal totems to survive. But again, the Spideys throw that back in his face, like, "Oh yeah, who told you that? Your family, the same family that told you that if you killed enough Spideys, you could earn your way back to their table. And how many hundreds of years ago was that?" But this is starting to get to Karn as once that's brought up, he ends up grabbing Ashley, who was the one that threw that point out, by the neck, and says, "Do you know another way? Is there another way?" But yeah, the Spideys do showcase that they don't have other options, but if he helps them, then maybe can find alternatives on Loomworld. But again, Karn thinks that that's stupid, and he calls himself a damned fool for even hoping, because ultimately he believes there's only one truth: his family, and that at the end of the day, it's pointless to defy them. But ultimately, the Spideys once again tell him that's just what those people that's just what those in power want you to think, that that there's no other way, that there's only one option, but essentially you're the master of your own fate. And Billy even talks about how in his journeys across the multiverse, he's seen countless worlds, and Karn's probably seen even more in his hunts across the multiverse, and all of them are boundless, limitless, filled with life and infinite possibilities, that there's never more than one path. And then even Anya talks about when it comes down to fate, well, who do you think told us about this? As she tells them that the one who gave them the scroll was the Master Weaver, which actually does surprise Karn. As such, they do tell Karn that, yeah, they took a big risk telling him that, and he could easily just bring that information back to his family, and they probably welcome him back. But they still say that even if he was brought back to Loomworld, they'd still probably be making fun of him behind closed doors. So ultimately, hold on again. Again, sorry, was checking on something. But either way, yeah, they showcased, they'll still be treating you like the redheaded stepchild, or you could join us and fight on the side of life and hope. And Karn does again try to give one last meager argument about how his hunger as an inheritor may be insatiable, but again, Anya counters that, stating that maybe they could give him that each of the Spideys here could give a portion of their life force, and which could power him up, which Ashley does object to, but Anya says that no one has to do it if they don't want to, which though Anya admits that Ashley kind of has a point for being so freaked out because, well, this guy's is still technically one of the enemy. If they're willingly handing their life force over to him, it essentially leaves them wide open for him to kill them. But essentially, when Karn realizes when all everything the Spideys have said finally sinks into Karn, he breaks down, because after all, he spent hundreds of thousands of years hunting spider totems because he believed that doing this would finally earn him a place back with his family. And now he's learned that basically everything he's done, all the death, destruction, carnage, and all the lives he's ruined, pointless. And that ultimately, there was one thing about him that his family was right about, that he was a monster. But again, the Spideys do state that they don't believe that there is still hope for him, and that they all have to take a risk, and that if he does willingly trust them, then they're willing to take a risk on him as well. As such, the assorted Spideys gather around him, sans Ashley, and so Karn says thank you before he starts siphoning the life force out of the assorted Spideys, and he doesn't kill them. Yeah, he takes a portion of the life force out of each of them, but they're all still alive by the end of it. A little woozy, but otherwise fine. Which, yeah, Karn says that will do, that will help, and so the Spideys say, "See, we took a risk on you and it paid off. Now let's hope that we can keep it. Then let's hope that we can keep doing that and forge a better future together." And as such, Anya and the various Spideys open a portal to Loom World, take Karn with them. Now as he joins the Spider Army officially. And the story ends as Spider-Man and her, Peter and Ben just look on, and Peter goes, "Well, that was weird." So there's that. But as for the second story, this one called Bugged, the Spideys featured in this one, or the primary Spideys in any case, are actually Mayday and the Uncle Ben of Earth 3145, which, yeah, the second story technically takes place before the first one, as it involves Mayday after she learned about the whole ritual involving the bride, and the Scion, because, well, she knows that this is not going to end well. Because because her brother's the Scion, he's going to be sacrificed. She doesn't want her brother to die. She's already failed her family, so she just wants to. So like I said in the main story, she just wants to charge into Loom World and go and all guns blazing. Of course, the other Spideys think that this is a suicide mission. She can't go in there She can't go in there unprepared and without a plan. It will just get them killed. So for now, the best option is to stay put and figure things out. But this really only just gets Mayday even more pissed off, to the point where she continues calling the various assorted Spideys phonies and frauds, and that there was only one real Spider-Man, her father, and he's dead. And while Uncle Ben does try talking her down, saying that you're safe here, that she's safe here, that leaving now would be tantamount to suicide, again, she's even less willing to listen to Ben because, well, he let his world get nuked, so she really doesn't think he's the poster boy for ducking down. She doesn't think he's really the best person to be motivated to try to talk her down at the moment. And as a result of this, she ends up storming off from the Spideys and just runs across and just starts bouncing across the bunker. Although Uncle Ben does try following her. But yeah, as Mayday is jumping around the bunker, it's clear she's still dealing with some stuff. While she is still damning the other Spideys, calling them all fakes, phonies, and frauds, and that none of them really know what she's going through, none of them know what she's really gone through, none of them knows the true weight of responsibility and all that stuff, it's clear that some of this hate is not just directed at the Spider Army. Yeah, when she called all the assorted Spideys phonies and that none of them were the real Spider-Man, she was including herself in that lineup too, because she still blames herself for what Deimos did to her family, because after all, she was supposed to protect them, and now, for all she knows, she's all that's left of her world's Parker family, and, well, the guilt is eating her up from the inside, to the point where, in a burst of anger, she ends up punching a wall. However, after she does this, that's when Uncle Ben manages to catch up with her and basically he just wants to talk to her, basically get to know her, which I do kind of like, because after all, they do have something in common. Both Ben and Mayday lost their families because of their lives as spider people, and, well, Mayday has something that Ben does not. a future with Peter, and so Ben does end up asking Mayday about her world's Peter, like what was he like, and how was his life, but Mayday is still not willing to talk, and at this point she does have a lot more aggression to deal out, and so she decides that she's going to work out her issues on Uncle Ben, as she immediately tries to engage him in a fight. At this point, it's mostly just dodging around with her continually trying to land a blow, but Ben continuing to dodge. But throughout the whole fight, Mayday is just trying to beat him down with words about how he failed his world, how he does nothing, he's a cow, how he does a coward, how her Peter would be ashamed of him right now. And while Ben keeps trying to counter her, saying, "Hey, my Peter, which is as real to me as yours was to you, and don't you dare talk to me about responsibility and all that. That I've lost people too." Basically, again, Mayday is still just angry at him, and it's very much clear that, again, like I said, she's directing a lot of her self-hatred at Ben. At this point, she's using him as a metaphorical punching bag, so yeah, she's not exactly willing to listen to him, especially since, again, she continues to throw in his face that he just sat by and did nothing while his world went to shit. Well, however, as the battle goes along, Ben and Mayday's spider senses start tingling. And so when they wonder what the heck the danger is, Mayday ends up looking to where her spider sense is pointing her, and it's to the hole in the wall that she punched. Yeah, it turns out she hit pretty hard because, well, from the wall comes a horde of mutated radioactive spiders. Yeah, while human life may be extinct on this Earth, a lot of the insects thrived on it, and put simply, they're now invading the bunker. Which, yeah, Ben even calls Mayday out on because she was the one that punched the hole there. As such, Mayday and Ben start doing their best to try and hold the spiders off, but basically anything they're throwing them, they do nothing. Mayday tries shooting stingers at them, which, yeah, she can shoot stingers, but those do nothing. She tries bringing walls down on them, it does nothing. So she tries using a power that's unique to her. Basically magnetizing the floor, because, yeah, one of Mayday's abilities as her world spider person kind of affects her wall crawling abilities. While most other Spideys can stick to walls without any effort, Mayday actually has to concentrate more when it comes to her powers. And basically, not only can she use it to stick to walls, but she can also use it to magnetize surfaces. Case in point, she tells Ben to cling to the wall, and she magnetizes the floor to stick the spiders in place. And from there, basically, it leaves the spiders completely open and so Mayday and Ben begin just wrapping the spiders up in their web lines until they can eventually push them out back through the hole and seal it up with their own webs. As such, throughout all this, Ben did compliment Mayday on how she seems to have these abilities that no other Spideys seem to have, but she talks about how who's to say that no other Spideys do have these powers. Have you ever actually tried? I may be a teenager, but even I learned that you don't know if you can do something unless you actually put in the effort and try. However, again, once they manage to seal the crack up, Ben does try to once again talk to her and say, "Look, I understand what you're going through, but going to Loom World is a bad idea. It's a suicide mission, and as long as you're here, you're safe. And maybe this place can be safe if you just try and let it." But yeah, Ben offers a handout to Mayday, but she makes it clear that she does not care. She still wants to go to Loom World, and she has to do this for her brother. And she even talks about how if the multiverse really is infinite, she hopes there's a world where she woke up that day and she had wheat cakes with her family and little brother, and makes it clear that no matter what happens, she's gonna kill Deimos. So yeah, it kind of has a somber ending as she walks away, leaving Ben there. So all right, so my thoughts on these stories. Hold on one sec. Sorry about that. I had to take a breath, but anyway, yeah, my thoughts on the issue. Thoughts on the first story, which I don't think has a name, because I even looked in the compendium in the beginning of this book, and that first story does not have a name. It's weird in that case. But either way, my thoughts on the first story is I enjoy it. I do like that it does explain more about what happens with Karn, and quite frankly, I think it's a good character piece with Karn. While the main draw of Spider-Verse Team Up involves having various Spideys across the multiverse teaming up, well, remember remember how I said when I looked at the main Spider-Verse storyline how I saw Karn as essentially the Spider-Man of Loomworld? This story kind of adds further credence to that, because this is kind of the moment where he actually turns his life around and starts doing good. Case in point, when the Spideys come, at which, yeah, by the way, it is a pretty cool fight scene, as we do see them trying to match with Karn and talk him down at the same time. But I do think it's a good character piece too, because, well, as I mentioned with Karn's backstory, Karn did not have a good upbringing. As I've hopefully showcased throughout these vlogs, the Inheritors are not a healthy family. They are very much twisted, sick, and in the case of Solus, abusive. They make you think. They basically want you to. They will pretty much press their boot down on your throat and tell you have to listen to us. We are the ones in charge, and to question us is to court death. And in the case of Karn, he's lived with that philosophy his whole life. While he has had moments where he's differed from his family and wanted to branch off, again, he's been conditioned his whole life to think a certain way. It's part of why he's still willing to do these hunts, despite the fact that he clearly takes no enjoyment in them. Because he thinks he has no choice. He thinks this is what he exists to do. He thinks this is what being an inheritor is all about, to hunt spiders and claim your superiority. But at the same time, it's not something he enjoys. Even basically, the one time I think we've only seen him try and lord his power over Spidey's in a more arrogant manner was in Edge of Spider-Verse #1, which is again one of the things I briefly mentioned when I talked about that issue, about how I thought that maybe it was a little weird for Karn to be talking like that. But even in points where he has kind of had like little bits of, oh, you amuse me, most of the time it's clear that he does not take enjoyment in what he does, that he only does it because he has no choice. Again, we saw that when he was hunting Spider-Man India and the superior Spider-Man helped Povder escape. Because after they were gone, he's like, I have to hunt them down or else the others would be right about me. When he ran to Brix and Bora, who were hunting Otto's team of Spideys, he was like, back off, this one's mine, and they were just mocking him while he was just clearly getting frustrated. And then again, when we learn about his backstory in the second storyline in that issue of Superior Spider-Man, he's talking, again, there's a hint of tragedy, because while he was supposed to be the golden child who would hunt the Master Weaver and bring him back to the Inheritors, he hesitated, because the Master Weaver told him, I have nothing to fear from you. You are not like your family. You do not want to destroy, but create. You don't want to conquer the multiverse. You want to explore it, which that does resonate with Karn. But ultimately, that moment of hesitation also technically affirms what his family is telling him, because a second later, his mother, who decides to go in for the kill herself, gets killed by the Master Weaver. And as a result of feeling that guilt, it just kind of affirms to Karn, I have to stick with this. That I showed hesitation and someone I love died, so I need to stay true. Whether I don't like this or not, I have to stay true to my family's birthright, because it's the only way. Especially when his family tells him you can't come back until you kill enough Spideys. But that's where this story comes in, because in this story, bit by bit, the Spideys break down his arguments. He continues talking about how he thinks they're fools for doing all this, but the Spideys tell him that that he owes nothing to the Inheritors because they fear him and abandon him. He tries saying, no, I have to hunt Spideys. I have to hunt animal totems. That's what I do. But which they say, well, who told you that? Your family, who abandoned you and left you hanging for hundreds of years now? And even when he thinks that there may be another way, he quickly shoots that down again, until the Spideys tell him, look, there is an infinite number of possibilities, and your family wants you to think that way, but you know better. You've seen infinite worlds, infinite possibilities, and who better to know about fate than the Master Weaver? And so, as it all finally sinks into Karn, as he realizes, because I do like how they showcase that throughout the story. You can tell that what the Spideys are saying is getting to Karn, the more he tries countering their arguments. And he tries hitting them with the ultimate counter argument, saying, "No, it's written in the stars. My family is the be-all end-all, you can't defy them, but then when they showcase to him that's what they want, and who better know, and then they show him that the Master Weaver is the one that sent them looking for that when they tell Karn that the Master Weaver is the one that sent them on Karn's trail, that's when he realizes, I was wrong. Everything I've done up to this point, every terrible, awful thing that I've done that I thought would get me back in with my family, would bring me back, would allow me to sit by them again and be treated as an equal, it was for nothing. And again, that continues reaffirming how Karn is technically the Spider-Man of Earth-001. Because the instant that finally sinks into him, that he realizes that all this death and destruction across the multiverse has been for nothing, he falls to his knees because he realizes, I've done all this horrible stuff and it's been for nothing. I'm a monster. Which, again, feels very much like a Spider-Man reaction. Excuse me a sec. Sorry about that, dealt with dog stuff. Plus got a cough drop. But either way, yeah. Karn, when he finally breaks down, it feels like a very Spider-Man thing to do. Just as the guilt really hits him, and he takes that guilt and turns it into a force for good. As now that he knows the truth, he allies himself with the people that want to help him, who genuinely trust him and even state that, yeah, we can take we're taking a risk helping you, but we want to show that we do want that we but we want to but we we're taking a risk helping you, but you're also taking a risk in joining us and trusting us, which ultimately that pays off, because by the end Karn does ally himself with them, and he repays their trust as they end up extending an olive branch to him by offering up portions of their life force instead of the whole thing, which in turn because of that ultimately makes Karn realize, okay, you do trust me, and so he does join them, abandoning the hunt and joining the Spider Army to go and face his family, which, again, I like. It adds more, it actually showcases the moment that brings him full circle, and again, it adds credence to the whole, he's the Loom World version of Spider-Man angle, which when you think about it, it makes me think that he's the Spidey that's being teamed up with in this story. As after all, while the first story does focus on Anya and her team of Spideys, well, this is technically them getting a new recruit for the army, wouldn't you think? It's, again, I do like that. It's nice, and I like that, and I do like how the Spideys do basically get him to join their side. Yeah, there's some good bit of fisticuffs to go around, and they do manage to get him to. They do have to ultimately get physical with him, but how they ultimately wear him down is not through brute force, but with their words, and I like that. I do like that. It's again goes into the whole, a superhero is not just someone who hits things really hard, but is someone who helps ultimately someone who helps those no matter their circumstances. And in the case of Karn, yes, he's done a lot of terrible things, but beneath it all, there is a lost soul who yearns for redemption and wants to do good. And with the Spider Army offering the olive branch that they do, it finally gives them the chance to do that. Again, now there are some minor things in the story that do kind of annoy me. It does kind of feel a little weird that certain Spideys are offering him the chance to get a reprieve, especially in the cases of Ashley Barton and Spider-Punk, which I have to remind you, in the epilogue to Spider-Verse, Spider-Punk was one of the Spideys that warned Billy that maybe he shouldn't fully trust Karn because he's an inheritor. Even though he's one of the Spideys that says, hey, we believe in you, we're all for second chances, which, yeah, it's kind of weird. And I get why Hobby would be cynical, it's just, it feels weird that he's saying that. Maybe he's doing it because they need him to join the army, but I don't know, it feels weird is all I'm saying. But either way, it is still a nice story. Short, sweet, just short and to the point. I do kind of like the brief cameo from Spider-Man, which again, she ends up getting more attention later in later Spider-Verse storylines, so that's a lot of fun. But overall, it's a nice story. It shows how the Spider Army won Karn over to their side. I like how they did it by just kind of talking him down and appealing to his better nature. And overall, it's just nice, and I like it, and adds more credence to the whole Karn is the Loom World Spider-Man thing, which again further sets him up as the future Master Weaver. So I like it. It's nice. As for the second story, Bugged, this one is once again a nice character piece for Mayday and her story arc within Spider-Verse, because as we showcased with Spider-Verse, she was going on a downward spiral throughout the whole story, because how she got pulled into the event was Deimos attacking her home and killing her father, and to her knowledge, also her boyfriend and mother. Again, this is before she returned back to her world and learned that the latter two were still alive. And ultimately, and again, prior to this point in the story, her younger brother Benji was just kidnapped by the inheritors because he's one of the important spider totems that they need to sacrifice for their ritual to eradicate any future ones from appearing. So it makes sense. And so, of course, in that situation, as we saw in the story, she's getting more desperate. She just wants to hold on to anything that she can of her family, because again, Benji's all she has left. Her other family is her own family is gone, and unfortunately, as they were being slaughtered, she had no choice but to just sit there and watch. And you see in the story how that affects her. She's more angry and bitter, and she's so filled, and you can see her so filled with self-hatred and anger because of it. And to the point where when the other Spideys are trying to talk her down and say, look, we need to think rationally here, we can't just go in guns blazing, she just goes and calls them cowards and frauds. But once she's alone, it's clear that she was also like I said, she was also talking about herself in that regard, because again, she blames herself for not being able to save those she cared about. And as a result of this, she's just you can see that she's just so filled with anger and remorse and regret. And as a result, she just has all this aggression. And sure enough, that's where Uncle Ben comes into the fray, which I like the character angle with him. He is clearly trying to relate to her in some regard. As we established at this point in the storyline, Spider-Ben was a broken man. Because like Mayday, he also lost those he cared about. His family was killed by his world's version of the Green Goblin, and he could do nothing but watch, just like Mayday with Deimos. But basically, the difference between them is how the deaths of their loved ones broke them. In the case of Mayday, it broke her by just making her angry and directing all that anger towards herself, wanting to find an outlet for it, and the one thing she wants is to cave in the face of the man who took everything away from her. But in the case of Ben, it broke him in the sense of that he just felt useless, that he felt alone. And as a result, you have these two differing Spideys who both lost everything they cared about, but put them on two opposite ends, which kind of explains why Mayday is still willing to fight Ben, because in her eyes, she wants to keep fighting, but she wants to keep fighting, and she wants to make the man who took everything away from her pay. Whereas she looks at Ben and she sees a coward, not just because he hung up the webs and let his world die, but because he's not willing to fight anymore. That he's willing to just hide away in a corner. Which, okay, yeah, that's fair. He is essentially a coward. He even admits that he's a broken man. But pretty much, it's clear that a lot of the anger she holds towards him is stuff that she feels about herself. She thinks she's a coward. She thinks she's the one that held back. But as long as this old man is here who did do all these things, she can direct those at him, and she feels justified for doing it. And of course, Ben still is there to defend himself. Yes, he admits he ran away and hid, but he also had loved ones. He had people he cared about. And ultimately, that's part of the reason why he's even going to talk to May at all. Because to a degree, he knows what she's feeling. He knows that loss. He knows that hurt. And as a result of that, he does want to relate to her. It's why when he managed to catch up to her, he begins asking her about her world's Peter. Because at the end of the day, they may be from two different realities, but they both still love the same people. I mean, okay, yeah, Mayday never met Aunt May, and odds are, and because Peter died so young in Ben's timeline, he never met Mary Jane, but they both loved Peter, their versions of Peter. And so, from both of their perspective, and essentially from Ben's perspective, he's not just asking about Peter because he wants to relate to May, because he wants to share in something. Again, going back to how it is, as we learned with this world, with Earth 3145's Ben, his Peter died young, as an act, from an act of vengeance to hurt Ben. And so to learn that in another world, that Peter not only was the one that got bitten by the spider, but went on to have a family and a daughter who he's now seeing up close, and who is now grown up and taken on the mantle of Spider Girl herself. He's just like, what was he like? What was your Peter like? Which I think is a smart thing to do. It's not only smart. It's not only to help give him comfort, but to talk about May too. They could share these experiences together. But again, because May is so emotional right now, she doesn't want to talk about it. She just wants to vent her anger on something. And in light of the inheritors not being there, she'll go with the guy who just decided, screw the world, I'd rather hide in the bunker. So it makes for some good character clashing as we see both of these different Spideys duking it out, which both of them suffering from similar tragedies, but both affecting them in very different ways. And I like that. I like seeing that clash of personalities, especially at the end of the story when Ben still is offering her a hand of friendship. But again, they're still in two different places. As Ben is still advocating for her to stay in the bunker and be safe, but Mayday still wants vengeance. She still wants to find the guy who took her family away from her and make him pay. And that's ultimately the tragedy by the end of the story, which, at the end of the day, I think that also works towards our advantage. Because keep in mind, in the epilogue of the Spider-Verse storyline, Ben went to go stay in May's world, on Mayday's world. He went to go live with her, be a part of her family, look after little Benji. And now here, and keep in mind, that point in the story happened after Mayday realized this path is not going to help. Essentially, by that point in the story, both Mayday and Ben wound up going through their own bits of character arc as they both managed to move past what happened to their loved ones and try and be better than who they were before. In the case of Mayday, she realized that killing Deimos wouldn't do anything, and that ultimately, if she really wanted to respect her father's memory, ultimately she had to respect she had to do the right thing, and ultimately she decided, and that right thing was to just spare Deimos, because ultimately vengeance wouldn't help anyone, but yeah, vengeance wouldn't save anyone, but what was ultimately needed was justice. Which, yeah, she still hates Deimos by the end, but she knows that if she truly wants to live up to her father's memory, she needs to still hold strong to that despite her feelings, which does allow her to move on and get better, and ultimately is rewarded when she learns that her mother and boyfriend are still alive. In the case of Ben, because he was able to rise up and be better, he's now able to move on, and he's found new family in the form of Mayday and her mom and her mother and her younger brother. It's sweet. I like it. It's nice, and ultimately, I think that's what helped makes this better, as the Bug story showcases them clashing over both of their differing ideals and personalities, and because of their similar tragedies, but ultimately, it's them overcoming these tragedies in the main storyline that truly brings them together and truly realize what's most important, and that both of their mindsets at the end of the day were hurting them more than helping them, which, again, I think is nice. Again, add on the action with the two different Spideys clashing, and again, the stuff with the spiders, which does pay off in Spider-Verse, as we learn that those mutated spiders are what the inheritors are going to be feasting on when they get trapped on this world. It leads to some really awesome stuff. And again, there's also some really cool stuff when Ben comments on Mayday's own abilities and powers, because she actually does employ similar weapons and tactics that other Spideys can't have. Like, she has impact webs which shoot out web balls that explode. Then, of course, she has her pincers, which allows her to shoot spikes from her hands. And then, of course, the ability to magnetize surfaces with her wall sticking abilities. It's cool. I like it, and I like how Ben comments on it. So, again, good stuff. I like it. Oh, I like it. It's fun. I like it. Nice little contrast. So, yeah. Overall, first story, nice character piece for Karn that brings him full circle and showcase how he officially joins the Spider Army. Again, it does feel okay. Actually, one more complaint for that. It does feel a little rushed in the case of Karn. In some cases, it does feel like maybe he returned a little too easily, but otherwise, I still liked it. It does add more credence to the whole he's his world Spider-Man thing. And ultimately, the stuff with Mayday and Ben, I thought was a nice little clash of these ideals that spawned from similar tragedies, but ultimately put both of them at arm's length, despite despite this, and that ultimately the best way to overcome these mindsets was to move on, allow themselves to heal, and from that finally bond and grow closer as family. So again, I like it. Good story, filled with tragedy, but interesting to see. Interesting to see these two different Spideys and how they react to one another. Overall, issue 3 of Spider-Verse Team Up is I think is a good issue. That I think that puts a nice little bow on the Spider-Verse Team Up miniseries. So yeah, that's about it. I finally wrapped up talking about the Spider-Verse Team Up miniseries. So yeah, that's 2 tie-ins done now. So I do hope you enjoyed it. And like with Spider-Verse, I do enjoy the Spider-Verse Team Up miniseries because while they don't have as many feature as many stories as in Spider-Verse, the stories that we do get, I think, are still fun because it's just fun to see all these different Spideys from all these different continuities in the same place and clashing or working off of each other, and how they ultimately impact one another. Again, some stories do showcase how certain Spideys join the Spider Army and how they interact, and while another ones just have the Spideys teaming up for common threats, like in the case of when Six-Armed Spider-Man and Spider-Man Noir had to work together to help their counterpart who had an allergic reaction to the spider bite. I liked that story because of the clashing of these two different Spideys who grew up in very different environments, but now had to ultimately work together because at the end of the day, they're both Spider-Man and they wanted to help this kid who was essentially left defenseless in the face of the Inheritors. And then likewise, the stuff with Ben Reilly that showcased that ultimately, while the other Spideys potentially looked down on him because of his positive thinking, they also saw the benefits of that mindset because Ben Reilly refused to take defeat lying down, and it allowed him to keep fighting even when it looked like the odds were against him, so I like seeing that. I love the fun adventures when you saw Miles Morales and the Drake Bell Spidey have to recruit the 60s Spider-Man to their cause, which was just a lot of fun. I love the tragedy and character dynamics when Spider-Gwen met the Goblin Peter, which I thought was really nice and really kind of brought everything full circle, which another parallel I didn't notice till later. For Gwen, this is another chance to not only save Peter because she failed to save hers, but like her Peter, this one fell down a dark path and became a villain. So again, it's another chance that it's another angle for second chances there. And of course, the first story of this issue with Karn and how he joins the army, and again the clashing of these two different personalities with Mayday and Uncle Ben. So it's again a lot of fun, and it's why I like the Spider-Verse Team Up miniseries. It does what Spider-Verse should do: bring these Spideys together and see what happens when they interact. It's fun. It's fun, kick-ass, full of plenty of action, great dialogue and character moments. It's just overall a fun time, and if you are reading Spider-Verse and are looking for some good tie-ins, Spider-Verse Team Up is definitely a place to start. It's definitely something you should be reading. It's great. It's a fun time. It's just cool, and it's just cool seeing all these different Spideys interacting and having fun, both in tragedy and in light. So, yeah, overall, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I am Samuel Johnson, and I hope you tune in on Saturday, which is Free Comic Book Day, so I hope you go and visit your local comic stores and pick up some goodies. But as for the next bit of tie-ins that we'll be looking at, well, there were some away teams that branched off from the Spider Army at some point in the story, wasn't there? So I think it's time we check back in with those teams, as next time we meet, we'll be seeing what Jessica Drew was doing as she went to go follow Cindy Moon as she decided to go jump around the multiverse, as we start taking a look at the Spider-Woman tie-ins. So till then, hope you have a good night, stay safe, and take care.